Hello and welcome to Chapter 12, Identities and Community. Who are you? What's your identity? Mine have varied over the years. I started out, I guess, as a son, a brother, a ball player, a scout, a soldier, a husband, a father. Then I became a blind soldier, a blind father, a blind husband, a blind veteran, a blind student, a blind professor, and now a Rotarian. Notice how blind prefixed most of those. And the Rotary Club I'm in, they don't treat me like I'm blind. But a lot of the others, people saw me first as a blind person, then as whatever I was. So a lot of times we get these labels of identity in something we really didn't want. We didn't ask for. I didn't want to be a blind anything. But people see my cane and that's now I'm a blind whatever. Communities use specialized vocabulary, jargon, technical talk. Doctors tend to do that. A lot of times you have to ask the doctor, can you put that in lay terms, please? Can you speak in English so I can understand you? The book talks about a different type of specialized vocabulary called CANT, non-professional groups. To be perfectly honest with you, I've never heard of this word CANT as a non-professional group vocabulary in the years I've been doing this. So it was new to me. Argot is a secret language. And slang, it started out probably as jargon, and now it's known by the general public. It's known by the larger community. And the textbook used the example of 420. It started out as a slang, cant, argot, secret word, whatever, amongst people that enjoyed marijuana. And now it's most people in the general public understand 420. People use argot to identify themselves. If you see a bunch of soldiers together, they might say, hooah. If you see a bunch of Marines together, they say, hoorah. It's almost the same. The meaning is the same, but you identify which group you're with by the way you say it. Argot can also create boundaries. If you don't speak that secret language, then you aren't part of that group. So it puts up some communication walls, shall we say. Argot's often used, argot often has specific meanings to remove all ambiguity, especially in the medical field. They use these specific words to mean specific things, not what you general public would necessarily understand. For example, a few years ago, somebody running for president had a letter written by a doctor. Actually, he wrote the letter himself, the story is anyway. But he said everything, he took all his tests and they were all positive. Positive in the medical community means it's a bad thing. If you take a test for diabetes and it's positive, it means you got it. So that's one of the things that led researchers to believe the doctor didn't write the letter to begin with. Because the doctor would never say all his tests were positive. The doctor would say all his tests were negative. Argot is often used in media so members can recognize it. It might be a little symbol somewhere on there. For example, in Rotary we have a wheel. A little wheel, has 6 spokes on it. If I see that little wheel on a piece of propaganda, shall we say, I can automatically identify it's Rotarian. If you are not familiar with the Rotarians, you just see this little wheel on there and you really wouldn't know what it was. Insider reports when people have done research about different groups, there's a couple of ways to get it. One of them is insider reports. Somebody on the inside is telling us what's going on. You know, the secret societies that we have out there. Somebody inside tells us about it. The other one is a participant observer. He is somebody, or she is somebody, that joins the group. Is not a full-fledged member. I want to do research on your group. Okay. And they allow them to have access to different things. And they allow them to talk to the different members. And they participate in the activities of the group. And so participant observers are not members of the group, but they've been allowed access to the group by gatekeepers to research the group. One thing that I have seen is some people that start out as participant observers end up becoming indoctrinated in the organization and become part of the group. The book talks about a couple of different groups. The one they start with is British punk. And British punk would wear dog collars and safety pins and school uniforms as a parody. Now, I was in Europe at part of that time. And no, I was not a British punk fan. Before you ask. Never had the safety pin, didn't have the pacifier, didn't wear the dog collar. But I could see it all around me. And it was intentional self-construction of otherness. They didn't want to be like everybody else. They wanted to be themselves. The funny thing is, everyone that wanted to be like them were being like them. So they weren't, you know, a couple have told me, well, I just want to be myself, I want to be individual. Well, how come you're like all the rest of your friends? But that's what they wanted to do. This was their intentional self-construction of otherness. They wanted to be different. Punk of the 70s was raw, confrontational, and passionate. I didn't meet any one of them that was not passionate about their music. And their music was raw. Corporate cultures basically has been described as, this is the way we do things around here. For example, my son worked for Synovus for a number of years. And when he was a window teller to drive up banking, he could not have a baseball coffee cup on his desk that said Atlanta Braves or Go Georgia, Georgia Bulldogs or Auburn or whatever. It could only say Synovus because that's the way they do things around there. Organizations can have their own argot, symbols, and dress codes. Some private universities have dress codes. This is what you're required to wear. Some don't allow baseball. At Georgia Military College, not really a private school, but it's here in Georgia, you can't wear baseball hats because they don't allow it. You can't wear pajamas. My daughter got their associate's degree there, and then when she went to the University of Louisiana, Lafayette, while I was teaching there, she was like in shock. It's like, I can wear whatever I want. Yeah. You can wear what you want. Corporations have their own myths and legends. The founder of so-and-so company did so-and-so, so-and-so. I am a member of the National Federation of the Blind. They have a whole bunch of myths and legends about the people that started the organization and how they fought the government and all these other people that were trying to take away our rights as blind people. And most have a well-defined set of values. Southwest Airlines originally started out as a little intrastate airline that flew around Texas, and they caught a lot of resistance from the interstate air carriers. And one of the reasons they probably succeeded is because so many interstate carriers said, you can't do this because we said so. Have you ever had somebody say you can't do something and you did it just to prove them wrong? It may be one of the reasons why Keller, the founder, was so adamant about making sure it happened. He was also a little eccentric. He used to dress as Elvis and show up on a Harley. And every year, Southwest Airlines community can't wait to see what the new CEO's Halloween costume is. It set up a tradition, shall we say. And something they do is they reject most candidates. They want to make sure you're going to fit into the Southwest Airlines family, or they won't hire you. Google is another organization the book talked about, has been consistently on the best place to work lists, a couple of them. And I've heard that about Google for years, that that's the best place to work. That's the best place to work. I don't know what the hell I'd do for them. Oh, excuse me, I should have said that. I don't know what I would do for them. But I'm not going to relocate my family or whatever to work for Google somewhere else. But they're a flat company. They have very little middle management. Everybody's almost equal. Many corporations have umpteen layers of management, and the hierarchy shows. And if you aren't of this level, you don't talk to these people. If you aren't in the C-suite, you know what that is? CEO, CFO, CIO. The C-suite, if you're not in the C-suite, you don't talk to the people in the C-suite, unless maybe you're right below it. Sexual identities worldwide. A lot of people would think that whatever you think about sex here in the United States is the same everywhere else. Well, it's not. A lot of the labels people get because to put them in a category are different other places. For example, when I was in Kyrgyzstan, we were out behind a hotel playing frisbee, and one of the interpreters came up and said, "Hey man, there's this great market downtown. You want me to take you to it?" We said, "Sure." So well, kind of grabbed a clean shirt, was ready to go, and he kind of snickered. We said, "What?" He said, "Well, unless you want everybody to think you're gay, you need to go put long pants on, because in Kyrgyzstan, only gay men wear short pants." That's something I would have never thought of. We wear shorts here all the time in the States. Homosexuality is defined differently around the world. In some portions of the world, believe it or not, sex between two men is not considered sex. Sex can only happen between a man and a woman. I never thought about it until I read that, and I'd traveled the world and I'd seen it firsthand. I was reminded about it when I read this. Attitudes also vary around the world. Attitudes vary here in the United States. This is not in the textbook, but men in prison that have sex with other men don't consider it as gay sex or homosexuality. It's just situational sex. They want to get off, and they're going to get off because they have somebody to do it with. And when they leave prison, they go back to their girlfriend or their wife and continue on. Attitudes about gay people vary around the world, just like attitudes about everything else. Gay is not necessarily a sexual act. It's more an emotional attraction. There are many people that have had sex with somebody of their same gender that didn't consider themselves gay. They just considered it that was sex. I'm not emotionally attracted to that person, so I'm straight. A person can be gay and not sexual. Do you believe that? People can be heterosexual and not sexual. People can be in platonic relationships. So why can't a person be gay and not be sexual? You have to look at it in the whole of things, not just, the labels that society has given us around here. Attitudes about homosexuality and gay marriage. Personally, I just prefer to call it marriage. But the book calls it gay marriage. Most accepting countries were Spain, Germany, the Czech Republic, France, Britain, Italy, Canada, Argentina, and Mexico. U.S. and Brazil were tied at 60% of accepting gay marriage. The least accepting were Muslim countries and sub-Saharan Africa. And the book goes into a little bit of detail. It's interesting about Africa, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Some countries still have the death penalty for two people of the same sex having sex. That's a little extreme to me. That's a whole lot extreme to me. Begin with, if you're doing it in the privacy of your own house, nobody else should know about it. But some people can't be that constrained, I don't guess. The cultural basis for attitudes about homosexuality is a high masculinity culture dimension generally negatively relates to homosexuality. The more masculine a country is, the more it's wrong. Well, it hadn't always been wrong. You ever heard of Plato and Socrates and Aristotle? They generally had sex with one another because that's what they did. Let's see. Irrational fear of gay men and women. It's a learned phobia called homophobia. It's learned. I was at a conference last weekend talking about blindness. And blindness is a learned disability. If you learn you can't do anything, then you can't. If you learn you can't be stopped, then you can. Fear of somebody else's sexuality is definitely a learned fear. You had to learn it from somewhere. There are very few natural fears we have as humans. One of them is fear of falling. And I saw a study where they had this little kid crawling, and it looked like it was 3D painted on the floor. It was smooth. The kid couldn't fall. We got to the edge and backed up. My 10-month-old grandson was on my back deck. It's about 12 feet off the ground. And he was crawling around fine. He got to the edge and looked, and he hauled it away. He wouldn't go near the edge after that. So fear of falling is a natural, instinctive fear. Homophobia is a learned fear. Homophobia or homosexuality was not feared in the past. As I mentioned earlier, the Greeks, Aristotle, Socrates, and those guys. But other cultures were the same way. If men had sex, men just had sex. It wasn't no big deal. But now, in today's world, the more religious your society is, the more apt it is to be less accepting of homosexuality. And if you are a religious person, you can quote this out of the Bible, you can quote that out of the Bible, you can quote out of the Quran and all the religious works you want to. But you have to be careful and not cherry pick. If you're going to say, this text is what I live my life by, then, start looking at all the other stuff you don't agree with. Homosexuality was practiced in Africa often, but it wasn't feared until the West colonized it and it became a civilized society. Then it started getting feared. So many countries in Africa that are not Muslim have this hatred toward homosexuals, this fear, this homophobia, based on religious teachings that somebody taught them that showed up instead of their original cultural beliefs. In June 2012, the UN endorsed the rights of gays, lesbians, and transgenders. Has it changed the world? No. You cannot legislate morality. You can make laws that make something moral or immoral, but you can't legislate morality because people are going to do what they want to do. Sexual orientation as a basis for a community. You probably heard the old saying, birds of a feather flock together. Well, homosexual communities evolved because people that were gay wanted to be around other gay people. And because they have this their own group, a lot of times othering can apply. And especially in the case of sexual orientation. Negative words and symbols used by the majority were eventually embraced by the gay community. If you said a slur to them, they took it on as a badge of honor, just as the N-word did to a lot of people. It was originally meant as a slur. But then, quite often, in the past, not so much now, you could hear people of color using the N-word, calling each other that. They were taking the power away from that word by using it. And the gay community did basically the same thing. Dyke and faggot became symbols of gay pride. Queer is a symbol of gay pride. I'm queer. The rainbow flag is now used to identify the gay community. It started in San Francisco, and it's now a symbol of the gay community. Consequences of othering. Potential for mental and physical harm. When groups get othered, they get put down, they get harassed, they get picked on. A lot of adolescents trying to figure out their sexuality, telling the wrong person, get a lot of abuse, physical, emotional abuse. Even today, straight boys use the term gay and faggot to pick on somebody they don't like, to bully somebody that may not have that sexual orientation. But they're labeling them that way so they can pick on them. And so others will pick on them. Media portrayals of gay men and lesbians have created/reinforced stereotypes. Not all gay men prance around with a limp wrist and a lisp and tight pants, and they're not all that way. A lot of gay men are masculine. Not all lesbian women are butch. A very good friend of mine, she went to a PhD program with me, she married another young lady. And she's a singer, she's a dancer, she loves to dress up, she's very effeminate. And she told her class one day that she was gay. Mentioned something about her wife. And the class went, huh? She said, yeah, my wife, I'm gay. And the kid was, yes? You don't look gay. What does gay look like? We'll get into that again in a second, too. Discrimination often continues in employment. People go get a job. Somebody either reads them as gay or they're openly gay, and they list Alice, her wife, on her job application can get discriminated against simply because of their sexual orientation. Media and othering. Media, the community can use media to reinforce the community. They can write their own magazines and newspapers, have their own radio broadcasts and blogs, and reinforce the community. Media can also spread irrelevant and wrong stereotypes. Media can spread medical information. During the height of the AIDS epidemic, word got out to gay men, facts about AIDS got out to gay men faster than they got out to the regular community through the gay media. And they understood how it's transmitted and what you can do to avoid it and all these other things. And most of the other media were spreading misconceptions. Let's just put it misconceptions. You know, back in the 50s, they thought you could get sexually transmitted diseases from toilet seats. It's got to be a little bit more intimate than that. It's also another venue for advertisers. Many advertisers have found great places to talk about their product in gay media. And of course, they caught some flack from people that were straight and said, you're advertising in there, I don't want to deal with you. Okay, fine. They gained more by using gay media than they lost with people being prejudiced against it. Rejecting all labels. Diverse groups have challenged the idea of a single gay identity. And in my research for my dissertation, one of the things I looked at when I was talking about identity of the visually impaired was this one paper, and they rejected the positive, perfect gay image. Most gay men weren't handsome with a full head of hair and abs, six-pack abs. Most gay women weren't butch and wore men's clothes. And they rejected this label because a lot of people labeled that's what gay is. And like my peer was told by her student, well, you don't look gay. What does it look like? And accepting a specific label can be restrictive to defining yourself. If I accepted the label blind, I'd probably be not teaching class, learning Braille, and I don't know what else. A friend of mine lost his sight in racing a car. He was on Formula One, Top Fuel, that type of stuff. Hit a wall. I'm not racing on the streets. He hit a wall at 175 miles an hour, severed his optic nerve. He didn't know what he was going to do. One night he had a dream. Next day he built a motorcycle. Not next day, but after that he built a motorcycle. And he raced it on the salt flats. Three-wheel motorcycle. He did 52 miles an hour. And a lot of you might know, so what? He had no vision whatsoever. And he did it in a straight line without assistance. He used GPS to keep him straight. The next year he broke that record. And he just built a Corvette, and he ran 167 miles an hour, I think. And he's going to try to break the all-time blind man land speed record, which is 205 miles an hour. But this guy was driving with somebody else telling him left, right, left, right. Dan is going to do it by himself in a Corvette, shooting for 206 miles an hour. And he's building the car. He's machining parts that are going in that car. He is welding on that car. He has no sight, but he has muscle memory. So had he accepted the label of blind that most communities put on a blind person, he would not be doing that. I was in Peru, and everybody was getting out of my way with my cane, and I said, your community, they're so considerate of my cane. And she said, no, you're an anomaly. We don't let our blind people out, so you're just something weird to them. So accepting a specific label can be restrictive if you want to define yourself. I don't want to be the blind professor. I want to be Vernon or Dr. V, but I don't want to be the blind guy. From separation to assimilation. Gay communities kept themselves separated. It was safer. They actually developed something the textbook refers to as gay speak. And they would use it at certain times. If the situation was secret or threatening, they could say something to their gay partner that nobody else would understand. If the situation were, if they were around non-group members and they want to have a private thing, they could say it, or they would use everybody else's everyday language, so nobody could tell that they were gay, in case they heard it or understood it. And most common was in social settings, where they could just relax, be themselves, and talk. And gay nightclubs and gay bars got a bad image because of homophobia. More often than not, nothing worse goes on in one of them than goes on in a regular bar. I mean, ladies, how many times you've been to a bar and you weren't sure if somebody put something in your drink? It happens in regular bars. So why have this phobia about it? And they were, in the separation aspect of it, they were hiding in the closet. I don't know if I've told this class this or not, but a friend of mine wrote a book narrating the closet. And he was talking about the difficulty of writing the book. And it was difficult to tell his family and friends that he was gay. And I said, well, how about, you're young. What about people my age? A guy that's got not only a wife and family, but kids and grandkids. Has anybody researched that? And I asked another question, I can't remember what it was, and he said, are you sure you're not gay? I said, not that I know of. I'll ask my wife. But I understood where he's coming from, because with my cane, I come out every day. I'm out with my cane walking, and I'll pick up a cane and read something. And people are like, huh? Had a guy today ask me what my cane was for, because I could see. So I'm not saying that I had it as difficult as him, and please don't take it that way. It wasn't abominable for me to be blind, as many see his homosexuality. Integration to assimilation. How do we become integrated? How do we make it happen? How do we make it work? Pete Buttigieg took a step forward. He actually ran for president as an openly gay man with a husband. And he got a lot of votes. Of course, he dropped out. Biden went and da-da-da-da. But many people say, especially in the community, that they should be like everybody else. The blind community has basically the same chant. We want to be like everybody else. If I can use this computer to do that job, and he can use that computer to do that job, why shouldn't I have a chance at that job? And integration, it's becoming more integrated. You don't hear gay marriage as often now as you did when the law first passed. You hear marriage. And I no longer automatically assume that if a female tells me she's married to a man. I don't automatically assume if a man tells me he's married to a woman. That's part of the integration. You know, oh man, you'd like my spouse. Oh, really? Cool. You'd like my husband? Cool. I don't have a problem with it. If he smokes cigars and drinks scotch, I'm good with it. If she smokes cigars and drinks scotch, I'm good with it. We are starting to become a society where sexuality isn't a label we have to wear like they did during the German concentration camps. I have a cousin that was married, had children, got a divorce, got a girlfriend. Her family basically disowned her. Extremely religious in Valley, Alabama, just across the river. When she introduced me to her significant other, I said, hi. She stuck her hand out and said, hell no, give me a hug. We hug in this family. Well, evidently, I found out later that I'm like one of the few that hugged like we do everybody else. Had she introduced me to her male significant other, it would have been shake hands. Had a male introduced me to a female, it would have been a hug. But she didn't get that from most of the family. So that's chapter 12. I hope I enlightened you a little bit. Read the chapter, watch the video, answer the discussion question, and have yourself a wonderful day. And guess what? I'll post something new next week. Bye, y'all.